Blessings, beloveds. Welcome back to my channel. Wanting to introduce to you a really lovely lady that I've known for a very long time, actually, who's come back into my life just very recently. Her name is Joy Usher. You can see her there on the screen. She's an amazing astrologer, a lovely lady, and we're going to spend some time today talking about a traditional medieval astrological tool and technique, and we're going to be talking about Patricia Gucci. The majority of the time I'm going to hand over to Joy Usher because I would like her to present her knowledge and skill in this particular model. I'll be interacting as well, and we'll just kind of go from there. So hi, Joy, and thank you so much for joining us and for giving us your time and sharing your insight and wisdom.
Thank you, Anastasia. It's a pleasure to be here. I can't believe we've reconnected after so many years, but the cosmos is a strange place and, you know, we never should question it. I suppose really to introduce myself to your subscribers, your viewers, I started astrology back in 1991, studied and then went into the traditional theme. I was very lucky to study with Robert Zoller. Now, he's no longer with us, but he is an icon. And we used to get these little tapes from him every week for $15 a week. And I would play it and I would transcribe it, and it became my kind of lore of astrology. So from that, I've developed very much into the traditional stream of things. I've continued to teach and to be a consulting astrologer over the years. And in 2019, I wrote 2 books, which I felt was, which I joked and said, I don't know whether they're the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning. I don't know. But the 2 of them are A Tiny Universe, which is traditional technique and an introduction to it. And that's very much my Saturn book, you know, like these are the rules, this is my references, this is who said that. And then my second book, which touches on what we're doing today, which is Fedaria, is called A Tiny Universe's Companion. And that's the last 3 chapters are dedicated to introduction to Fedaria to people. So yeah, that's
wow.
it. Yeah.
That's amazing. I had no idea you'd written 2 books. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well done.
That's what you do when you're old.
Well, you're not old.
Yeah,
you're not old yet, Joy. I think you've still got a lot of zest and a lot of energy and a lot of things to do before you transcend this world. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome.
Okay.
So that's wonderful. I mean, it takes a lot of dedication and discipline to write a book. You know, I too want to write a book. So
yeah, it's worth the journey. I say there's a book in everybody. There's a story in everybody, you know. Yeah. And it does overtake you, you know, like it becomes your absolute passion. And it did for about 3 years for me. I wrote from 2015 to 2018 when I finally published. And I'm lucky I have just a wonderful patient partner who is quite happy to be ignored for large periods of time so I can do what I want to do. So I'm very fortunate.
Wow, you are very fortunate indeed. That's fantastic. Okay. All right. Well, so what I'll do, Joy, is I'll just hand it over to you. And I think you're going to begin with an introduction of what planetary periods are, Fedaria, etc. So I'll just let you take it over, and I'll interject every now and then with questions and comments.
That'd be fantastic. Thank you very much, Anastasia.
Thanks, Joy.
Thank you. Now, I should be able to... You've hit the share screen or...
Yes.
Oh, right. Okay. I've got you. Yeah. Okay. Beautiful. Fantastic. So we should be good. And what I'll do is I'll increase this to its full size. This is the... beautiful. Okay. Now, you'll appreciate, I love to use images from Unsplash, you know, free photography, and I acknowledged it at the end. And I found this beautiful image of Venus. Can you see Venus here?
Yes.
She's the morning star here. So this is in honor of you, and also in honor of this person that I'm looking at, Patricia Gucci. Venus would have looked a little bit like this on the morning she was born, or even at the time she was born. So This is a discussion about what happens if people are born close to, with their sun close to the horizon. Close to the horizon will be either a dawn birth, in the early morning, or dusk as the sun's going down. So I wanted to concentrate on this and talk about, sort of how difficult this can be. And I believe that you rectified her chart. So this is going to really play into this beautifully when I do the Fedaria. I just want to quote from Patrizia. She's actually goes by the name of Patrizia Regina, but she fought very, very hard to keep the Gucci name. And just recently, in 2006, when she was released from prison, she made this comment: "I still feel like a Gucci, in fact, the most Gucci of them all." So I always retain her name in kind of that honor of the fact that she probably is one of them, even though she married into the family, she is the heart and soul of them. Okay. This is beautiful image. Love these images. But this shows you a little bit about, now, hope, is this clear enough for you? Anastasia?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay? Right, yeah. Okay. Where your sun lies in your natal chart tells us straight away. So if it's anywhere from the 7th house around to the 12th house, if it's at the top of the chart in what we call the top hemisphere, then you are known as a diurnal birth. You're born during the day. And the whole idea is that there's a kind of a psychological shift between whether you're born during the daytime or you're born during the nighttime. And the idea of being born in the daytime, and I use this in several sort of lectures that I give, and so if I'm repeating myself, if you've seen them before, but the idea is that the sun is predictable on a level that we can't understand. We expect that sun to rise in the east around about 6:30, something like that. A little bit later if we've got, sort of winter time, a little bit earlier, depending on whether we do daylight saving or not. But we see the sun on a particular pathway. And even if we've got clouds and the clouds shift, we can pretty much know what time of day it is. It's instinctualness. So if you go into the underground, if you're in London, you go into the underground, or if you are going to a cinema, and you come out and you think, what time is it? Your first reaction is to cast your eyes to the sky and to think, oh yeah, okay, it's about here, it must be before noon, or it's come round here, it must be afternoon and about 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock, or down towards this setting time here at 6 p.m. So we have this innate knowledge of what the sun's doing. And that works for people who are born during a daytime chart, because it's this idea that I have a plan. I'm on focus, I'm on point, I know what I'm doing in an hour's time, I know what I'm doing in a week's time, I do preparation, I do planning, I do all these sorts of things to get a sense of where I sit in the physical world. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so the sun's got 2 planets that help it, and one of them is Jupiter and one of them is Saturn, and they're known as the lieutenants of the sun. So what you get with Jupiter, I'll deal with Jupiter first. Jupiter is the idea that the sun is there to glorify us, to give us reputation, to give us a name, to give us a sense of ourselves. The more modern astrologers talk about ego, and I don't disagree with that, but it's a sense of, in traditional terms, it's a sense of the divine light within me. What is the divine light, and how do I express it? How do I bring it forth? All those sorts of things. So often we do it by feeling valuable in society, or having a place somewhere where we can stand up and say, this is who I am, value me, I have credibility, honor me, respect me, listen to me, all those sorts of things. Jupiter will work to push the boundaries of dreams, and it will say, you can do this, this would be marvelous, this would be fun. You can gain more accolades, you can get more notice, you can become famous, successful, ambitious, all those sorts of things. And Jupiter is allowed to fly and do all these sorts of things. But on its counter is Saturn, and Saturn helps the sun by saying, what's realistic? What can you actually achieve in the time you've given, within the limitations that you have? What are your physical restraints? And one of them is timing. How is this possible? So between the 2 of them, they aid the sun to achieve its benefit. Okay, so this Fedaria, which is a lovely Persian term from the 1st century, talks about saying every planet gets a voice. Every planet has a period of time where you can express this planet, you can find out what it's about in the chart, you can view your life through the lens of the energy of this planet, if that makes sense. So there's this lovely table that runs through, and it's known as the Chaldean order. It starts with Saturn at the top, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, and it's known as the order of the planets, the Chaldean order. So this interrupts the Chaldean order, but it starts with the sun. So if you're born during the day, so when you look at your chart and you see that you're in any, your sun's in any of those planets at birth, then the first 10 years belong to the sun. So the first 10 years are about learning your way in which you will introduce yourself to the world when you're an adult. And that's hugely important because it teaches you how to hone your skills. And we might think, well, a child between birth and 10 years old is not doing that. I tell you what, you watch a child be a sponge, you know, even before their first birthday. They're learning everything. They're copying everything. You smile, they smile back at you. You clap your hands, they clap their hands. They're little sponges for all these things.
100%.
Sorry?
100%.
Oh, absolutely. So you've got this idea that in the first 10 years, you are learning, if you're born in the daytime, how to gain attention, how to get praised, what you get slapped down for, what you get criticized for, what you get ignored about, all those sorts of things. How you socially fit into the world is all about that. And then you've got this lovely roll on, which almost feels like a natural kind of rhythm that goes, well, after you learn about yourself, for the next 10 years from 10 to 18, you learn about socializing with other people. You learn about what attracts them. You learn about what you enjoy from them. You know, you've got this lovely kind of Venus period in those teenage years, if you're born during the day, to learn about your sexuality. You have changing body. Your hormones are ranging, and you're learning all about crushes and love and sex and all that sort of thing, pleasure, all those sorts of things from the age of 10 to 18. Then on this, and you don't discard this stuff. It's like layering a cake, So then you move on to Mercury, and Mercury says, what do you need to learn in this world? What knowledge do you need? Do you study? Do you find a job? Do you go into a relationship? Do you get independence? All of these are under Mercury. Mercury isn't just about going to university and studying in those years. It's everything. It's my first job. It's my first, what I'm interested in. It's what I read. It's what I watch. It's social media. It's interesting because you can see these are the really strong social media years, 18 to 31. A Mercury is cramming to see, particularly if you're born during the day, to see how you can express yourself and how you can be an individual in the internet world too. So you have all this influence by Mercury for 13 years. Each one of these planets is in charge for longer periods or shorter periods. Mercury is the longest at 13 years. The shortest one is Mars at 7 years. So after that, you go into the moon, which is the 31 to 40. It's often about emotional things. It might be about family things. It might be about becoming a parent. But it's also about emotional nourishment. All this time, you've been working on a head level kind of thing. And these years, the 9 years of the moon from 31 to 40 can feel like, for a diurnal person, going into the darkness. They can be really scary years. They can be the feeling of, I've got all these accolades and I've got all these honors and everybody thinks I'm wonderful and I've got a bunch of wonderful friends, but I'm not happy. I'm not emotionally fulfilled. How do I get that? So that's what happens for a diurnal person. Then it moves on to the years of Saturn from 40 to 51. There are 11 years here. And Saturn in a diurnal chart, remember that Saturn is a helper of the sun. Saturn is totally familiar with the daytime chart. So Saturn builds up your resume. Okay, that's 11 years from 40 to 51 of saying, what do I need to do now? What's practical? What's achievable? I know all my resources from the previous lords. Now I get to put it into practical application. And then we go into Jupiter to 51 to 63. This is why, you know, while we're muddling around in these years up here, if you're a daytime chart, these are the chunky ones here from 40 to 51 and 51 to 63. You know, the kind of the adoration for being young, you lose that really quickly when you use Fedaria, because you start to say, this is the bit where I get the most out of this, Jupiter. And then the last one is the warrior. You know, 7 years of Mars. Now, 63 to 7, you might wonder why Mars is so late in coming forward. But in many ways, Mars is about where you really gather your energy together, whether you armor yourself and you say, this is what I have lived and this is what I've done. You know, a little bit like the old kind of campaigner who's been to war so many times and then can sit back by the fire with a glass of port and reminisce. That's the possibility of Mars. But I also will talk to clients who are in this period and say, be careful of Mars, because you don't want the embittered, angry kind of Mars energy coming through. You don't want to say, oh, look at all those young bucks and look at everything they're achieving and they don't know anything and they're so, you know, arrogant. And it's a reflection of your Mars Fedaria. So be careful when you do this one, that you do it with compassion and you do it with love and you do it with kindness. Always do Mars with kindness. So that's a diurnal chart. Any questions?
Yes, thank you for that. That was a really great description of all the different periods relative to being born during the day, right? And I know there's heaps more, but that was a great introduction. So here's my question: where are the nodes? Do you use the nodes?
The nodes always, for whether you're a daytime or a nighttime birth, they come in after the 7th period, always.
Okay.
So there was a bit of discussion and a bit of fighting about that back in the 90s, but it's actually, we've translated more things. And actually in 2012, Robert Hand, who was really the predominant force of
the
authority, he said, absolutely, we found more translations, work through every planet first, and then everybody does the nodes.
I have to agree. I just wondered what your personal opinion was, because I couldn't see them here, so I wasn't sure, and we hadn't discussed it, so I didn't know. But I remember many years ago when I first studied medieval astrology, I played around quite a lot with the nodes being at the middle of life, right? Yes. And it wasn't until years later, through listening to further teachings, etc., where I decided that no, it feels right to me. That they're actually in the later part of life, and that's the system I've been following for many years now. So I just wanted to confirm that you were on the same page with that. So
and it was never a discussion about the diurnal Fedaria, which is really interesting. It was always a discussion about this one, the nocturnal one. Is the belief that the nodes should somehow come in around about the 5th period between Mars and the Sun. So this was the big discussion. The diurnal was never at risk. It was only this one. But what I kind of worked with was that, and I'll tell you now, I'm a nocturnal person. And so I am very defensive over nocturnal charts, you know. So when we had this interaction.
I'm nocturnal too. So
you will understand this. Well, I'll talk about this. So see if you relate to it. So, and what I realized was what people were talking about, how much upheaval we had if we put the nodes, because they used that, the 5 years of the nodes between Mars coming in at age 39 and then leaving, I think, at about 44 or something. See, I don't even remember now. But yeah, there was this idea that no, the nodes are so unsettling and I can prove it. What I realized was if you bring in and you continue the Chaldean order, it's actually the sun's period. And for a nocturnal person to go into a sun period is like going from this lovely warm womb out into the light. Like, it is really confrontational. It is about illumination, but it's also about exposure. And I think that's what it was talking about. It was talking about this 10 years of the sun being, oh, now I have to prove to the world I've been cluttering around doing the moon and doing Saturn and Jupiter and Mars, and now you're throwing me out into the light, and I now have to do a diurnal kind of personality, or a fake diurnal personality. And that was, you know, what was really unsettling people. Around about the age of 40 is such an important period, because if you're born in the nighttime, it's the sun's Fedaria. I'll go back to the other one. And if you're born during the day, it's the moon's Fedaria. Or it's the beginning of the Saturn Fedaria. That's it there. So you're either doing the Saturn at the age 40 and coming into that realization, or you're going into the Sun Fedaria if you're born at night. Last October, the end of October, I did a lecture with the AA conference. That's how we reconnected. And I talked about Katy Perry's chart and Kelly Osbourne's chart, and they're both coming in to this period here where they're turning 40, and the difference between them. And one is a daytime chart and the other is a nighttime chart, and the differences between them. So that was really interesting. Okay, I digress. If you're born with your sun anywhere under the horizon, and I will use whole sign here. So you may have a sun which is early degrees and looks like it goes above there, but you've got to be a little bit careful that it may get dragged down into the first house or the first sign by whole sign. So I'm always very aware of, okay, and it's part of the discussion with this, are you born around the dawn and the dusk kind of thing? But anywhere between the first and the sixth houses, even though it's the sun which defines the hemisphere, you're actually called a nocturnal person.
Yes.
And the idea of the moon is how incredibly different it is from the sun. You know, we have this orb that never changes with the sun. We have the illuminator, we have light, we have warmth. Whereas with the moon, we have mystery, we have intrigue, we have half a moon, quarter of a moon, no moon, full moon. You know, it is a different kind of energy, you know. You don't get the shadowing at nighttime. You'll get a bit of shadowing at full moon, but you don't get the clear clarity of shadows that you get in a diurnal. So nothing is really clear in a nocturnal kind of way. So what you have is, you know if you're bumbling around somewhere familiar, if you turn off the light in your bedroom or somewhere, you are groping around, familiarizing yourself with the physical world around you. You know that the chest of drawers is there. You don't want to fall over that. You know the chair is there. You know instinctively, because habit has taught you the physical arrangement of the space around you. And it's the same thing for a nocturnal person. Half the time it feels like the light is turned off and you are groping around instinctually in the dark, trying to familiarize yourself with the physical world.
So can I ask you a question that's just relevant to what you're saying, just so that the audience is clear as well. So that last comment that you made, are you saying that is the general sense of a nocturnal birth, that is a person born at night? That's the general kind of sense they have overall in their life?
Yes, absolutely, Anastasia. Yes.
Right. Just to distinguish from saying that it's not just the first 9 years of life. That's just the general kind of sense that energetically, you could say, or spiritually, or whatever word you want to use, that describes how a person sort of functions and operates in their world, in their reality, in their life. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. Yes, yeah. It is about feeling and emotion. I'm not saying a diurnal person doesn't have feeling and emotion. Don't think that. It's not that clear cut. But what you get with a nocturnal person is what I call animal cunning. Animal cunning, yeah. And that's not a negative. It's actually a survival technique. A diurnal person will march in there and do all this sort of clashing and banging and bluff and bravado. But a lunar person will go in carefully, quietly, will assess the situation, will emotionally gauge everything. You've got to remember, when we break down the qualities, which I use all the time, hot, cold, wet, and dry, the sun is hot and dry, and the moon is cold and damp, moist. I like moist. I think that's a lovely term. Cold and moist. So what you've got with the hot energy is to bluster in. is to charge in and to kind of go, well, I'll work it out as I go along. But what you get with cold energy is this idea of survival. I'll suss this out, I'll hold back, I'll get a feeling for everything. It's a little bit like I said, when you go from turning the light on to turning the light off in your bedroom, there is a period of time where you're adjusting your eyes.
Yes.
Okay, so you don't go, boom, I'm going straight in there. What you do is I'm going to let my vision go down, and I'm going to let my kind of sense of where everything is, my physical awareness, rise up. Then I'm less likely to be, and it's amazing how much vision you actually get. You'd be surprised. I'm going from a totally black room to one which has shades of grey is really interesting.
It is.
I challenge your audience to try it tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so acutely aware of that, Joy. Perhaps that's because I'm a nocturnal birth. I've always been very aware of what you just described, actually, since I was a little kid, really. Yeah.
Because, and the other thing is that, and again, this is not as clear cut as this is one and this is the other, but part of what you get with a nocturnal individual and a nocturnal psyche, which I like to use that term, is that you have to know about relatedness. Whether it is physical relatedness to the objects in the area, the darkened area, or it is relatedness to what everybody else is doing and everybody else is feeling. That there's almost like an emotional antenna out there that says, you're happy, you're sad, you're angry at me, you're not telling me the truth, all that sort of thing. That is nocturnal instinct. When I talk about animal instinct, that's what I'm referring to, is relatedness, if that makes sense. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So what you're seeing, you might be seeing a lovely smiling face, but your nocturnal instincts, your hackles are rising, That's called a nocturnal individual.
Oh, yeah.
So, it's about survival. So, of course, the first 9 years of your life, you are learning about your physical world, your physical nourishment and your emotional nourishment, because everything to do with the moon and traditional techniques is the physical world. So you are literally learning how a hand works at the end of an elbow, like how everything goes together. And of course, we could be simplified and say, well, a sun individual learns from the father and the moon individual learns from the mother, but it's much more complicated than that, because of course they are the symbols for mother and father. You are looking at nurturing at whatever level you can get it when you have the first 9 years of birth. The whole Jesuit saying of give me a child for the first 7 years of their life and I'll show you the adult is very, very true in Fedaria. Very true. Trick about being nocturnal, you don't go to Venus after you finish your luminary. Because the moon's at the bottom of the Chaldean order, Saturn goes to the top. And what you have is this really foreign, alien, harsh, separating energy that you've got to deal with through your 11 years of puberty.
Yes.
When you're a daytime person, you get to have control over your Saturn, over your life. You're doing it from 40 to 51. You set your own parameters, you set your own boundaries, you set your own ethical qualities, your moralities, your workload, all this sort of thing. You have dominion over when you're a daytime person. When you're a nighttime person, everybody else has it.
Yeah, for sure.
It's this total feeling of lack of control.
Yeah.
And it's one of the basic things when I talk to clients, this is where I start, because they are relating to this automatically, because they're going back to these years and they're remembering. I'm not saying Venus is great, the years between 8 and 20, because there's a lot of painful lessons there too. But ultimately, there's this feeling of everybody else having control over your life from 9 to 20 before you get to break free in the third period, which is Jupiter, from 20 to 32. So this is relatable. This is a template for everybody, day or night.
So I have another question, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So regarding the teachings of benefics and malefics, right? So Mars, Saturn being the two malefics, Jupiter, Venus being the two benefics.
Yes.
And of course, depending on sect, whether you're a night birth or day birth, you know, Jupiter has dominion or, you know, etc. Right? So, for instance, if you're a night birth, Saturn is the greater malefic, according to the basic.
Yes, yeah, that can be toned down, but yes, yeah.
So what I wanted to ask you was, if you are looking at, for instance, because I found it interesting that you said, you know, just because people are going through a Venus period, if they are a day birth, right, in their early years, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all roses, right? Of course, they're going to have challenging experiences. So when you are looking at this system and you're working with a client, whether they are a day or a night birth, how much weight are you giving to the concept of malefics and benefics relative to the different, you know, periods of life as described by the planets, and of course whether they are in detriment or fall, exalted rulership, etc. I just want to know if you could just talk a little bit about that from your experience.
Okay. One of the things that makes them benefic or malefic isn't about their natures. That's the first thing people should understand. They're not saying Saturn's horrible and Mars is horrible, because you've got to remember, in the mindset of the ancients, anything under the heavens created by God can never be evil. It can never be harmful. So all of these energies are really benefic in some way. But the problem is, and again, this goes back to the Chaldean order of the planets, and I'll repeat them. I haven't got a visual here, but if you bear with me, Saturn is at the outermost, followed by Jupiter, followed by Mars. Now, first thing we get is that Saturn is the furthest away from the sun's energy. So it is cold, extremely cold, with some dryness. So what we get is the idea of its extremities. It's so far removed from the sun is that it's cold. And of course, if we are talking about a melancholic temperament, or we're talking about, which is, you know, Saturnian, or we're talking about, you know, coldness, we use these terms in our everyday language. She's cold-hearted, you know, or he cut me cold, or, you know, like we use these terms as being distant or separated. So Saturn is what I would call the experience of cold separation.
Yes.
Now, there's nothing wrong with the planet. It's what we do with it. Okay. So that cold separation we both experience by doing it and by having it done to us. And it's like that whole idea that it slowly disappears from us. You know, it slowly disintegrates. You know, when we look back at what caused this incident, we have trouble working out how far back in time we have to go. You know, this relationship that no longer works. When did it go cold? You know, so there's this idea of Saturn is slow separation. Mars, and again, I'll go, okay, we have Saturn at the top, we have Jupiter in the middle, we have Mars, and then we have the sun. Now, the ancients reasoned that because Mars was next to the sun, it was extremely hot and extremely dry. And that's what makes it malefic, its extremities. So what you get with Mars is separation, but what you get is fast separation. I argue with you, you argue back, we're angry with each other. You know, I bring back that heat every time I think about what this discussion was about. That's what Mars is. So we have slow separation with Saturn, and we have fast separation with Mars. Rage, anger, bitterness, betrayal, all those sorts of feelings. And that seems to be the themes of what these larger amounts, and I'll go into smaller amounts in a minute, but what these periods are about. And in many ways, what we're happening with the nocturnal person is they're separating from their childhood. And they're separating through Saturn. It's slow, you know, it's happening day by day. Their body's changing, their emotions are changing, their parental relationship is changing. Slow. Whereas, you know, with the other one, when we go to diurnal, there's this desire to get on with it. When you go into Venus, you know, Venus says, this is all good and I want to do this and I'm growing and I'm beautiful and all those sorts of things is, you know, depending on what Venus is doing. Whereas Saturn is this terrible, slow disintegration of all my beliefs of childhood, which can be really isolating and frightening, and you know, you don't fit into your peer groups, you don't, and we all know, we all carry this feeling of Saturn. I don't care whether you're day or night, you still have this feeling of, why am I the oddball? You know, why am I the one here standing out here while everybody else is here? That's Saturn. Okay? And it's this idea of, you know, accepting that, and also all the threats to the lunar stuff before, that came before, you know. No longer is it enough that I have enough to eat, or I have enough to do, or, you know, I have enough love. Saturn says there's never enough love. You know, you've got to learn to love yourself, all those sorts of feelings. So they are really hard 11 years there before you get into Jupiter. Mars separations are faster from the ages of 32 to 39. You know, you're doing them, you know, you're in conflict with everybody from those ages. I don't mean for 7 whole years, but in different ways and in different times. And then you go into the solar principle of going, oh, now I start to get, and I don't know about you, but I didn't even start to know who I was until this 10 years of 39 to 49. I just, you know, like I was just awash with everything until I started to put things into placement. Followed by Venus, which seems very sad to get this beautiful Venus between the ages of 49 to 57. Everything's dropping, everything's deteriorating, you know, like life and age and, you know, birthing and all the rest of it is going, well, this is not Aphrodite. I love this, though, about being nocturnal. To me, it's about learning to love yourself. That's what I think Venus is. It's about building your female relationships around you, sorting out who really cares about you. You know, it's a really profound 8 years for Venus. And then you come into Mercury, and that's when you find your voice. That's when you start to, that's when on my 57th birthday was when I started to write.
That's probably when I'll write my first book, Joy.
because you've got something to say, Anastasia. You've got something to say. That's the truth. And you put all this mental work into putting this model into place and working with it. So, yeah. So that took me a little longer than I mentioned.
Yes, that's okay. That was great, though. Thank you for those great examples. Yeah, that was great.
You're welcome. Okay, so I wanted to move on and say, okay, we get this idea that sunrise is a very big deal in Fedaria technique, because 15 minutes can change it. Like the chart below, these are both sunrise charts, and I love the rays of the sun. I'm going to talk about the rays of the sun in a minute. But at 6:15, if I run a chart, and I use Solarfire Esoteric Technologies to run my Fedaria, but there are many others. But if I ran this 6:15 a.m. chart, it would set me up with the moon, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun in the Fedaria that I showed before. So in other words, it would show me this Fedaria and give me dates for it, okay? But if 15 minutes later, and I set the chart for 6:30 a.m., and even if that sun's just peaked over the horizon, what you get is this image of, we have a horizon not that's straight like the chart shows us, but is actually curved. So you can get light even in this chart here. You could have something like I've got in this image. You've got the rays of the sun. So you've got this whole debate about, even though technically I could call this a nocturnal chart, physically, if I went out there at 6:15 a.m. in the morning, I would get this kind of image of suns over, or rays over the horizon. So we've got to be very careful with these sunrise charts about whether or not we use Fedarias which are nocturnal or diurnal. Does that make sense?
It does. How did you resolve that dilemma? Because that's a big one.
I have an example for you later.
Awesome.
Patience, grasshopper. This is the opposite, okay? This is a 7:30. This is 15 minutes earlier. This is 7:30 at night. The descendant is 29 degrees of Capricorn, and the sun is 2 degrees of Aquarius. And again, I don't want to get into the whole thing about it, but I talk about it in Companion, about how we misunderstand charts. And in fact, it's the fact that it's the ascendant moving, not the planet. But anyway, that's a discussion for another time. But so we had, say we had a sun at 2 degrees of Aquarius and a descendant at 29 of Capricorn, then we would say this was a daytime chart, and we would set it as a diurnal chart. I'd put the information in to Solarfire. I'd come up with, you know, the Fedaria, which I'll show you later, and it would tell me diurnal. But I would have, if it's gone below the horizon at 7:30 at night, it's gone into a nocturnal chart. This is a little bit more clear-cut than a sunrise chart because the degrees are moving behind the sun. So I have no debate that this is a nocturnal chart, the 7:30 p.m. chart. You know, even this one at 7:15, I still should have, like you can see here, I've still got visibility of the sun. I've still got this sense of presence. The sun is still present. I might have gathering clouds. I might have a sun that's down here on the horizon, but you've got the idea, is it's still present. There's not much of it, but it's still there. So I'd use diurnal. This is, to me, is much more clear-cut, a dusk chart, because this is definitely diurnal. Once the horizon has shifted and the sun is below the horizon, definitely nocturnal. This is the one that I am plagued by, absolutely plagued by, this sunrise one. You know, should we be using something that goes above the sun, or should we be actually, it's always the debate of actually, is this truly nocturnal when it looks like I've got the sun's presence there? So yeah, this is the discussion that I've got. So from that point, having done that introduction, hang on, I'm just going to move this forward, to the nocturnal, to say, okay, just to remind you, this is very, very quick, these two charts would be diurnal, and I would use the run of Sun, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars, because the sun is still above the horizon. This is the questionable one. This would normally tell me I would go into a nocturnal chart, but this here, I have to put a lot of thought and debate into this rising point here. It would come up as this, but I have to challenge it and say, oh, what is it? So I've actually found a chart that expresses this, okay? This is Patrizia. So we get to do some astrology now. Are you happy for me to do that, or do you want me to go back for any explanations?
No, please keep going.
Beautiful. Okay, now, this is, and I've deliberately marked it as a nocturnal chart. This is the chart of Patrizia Reggiani, which is really what she should be, Patrizia Gucci. It's a AA chart, okay? But I'm going to tell you why I question the AA in a minute. I have an ascendant of 8 degrees of Sagittarius. The Mercury has risen by the time that she is born at the 7:30 a.m. Here's Venus up here. I showed you that first one of Venus as the morning star. This is literally what's going on when I showed you that first image, is the Venus has risen as a morning star. This is Mercury here, which is just coming over the horizon. We probably wouldn't see Mercury on the day of her birth because of the curve of the horizon. And also at 6 degrees, it may still be obliterated by the sun, because I think when only 2 degrees between it, we've got a chance that this sun is looking like it's risen. Does that make sense? So I've only got 2 degrees difference here. Okay? But I have, for the sake of being correct, I've used the nocturnal Fedaria here, started with the sun, moved on to Saturn, and then Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, and Mercury. The image on this side is, I don't know if you realize, but Gucci, well, for years, has been painting the side of its buildings. Particularly in Milan and New York. This is the New York one, New York City Gucci building. And in 2017, they employed the services of a young photographer designer called Coco Capitan. She's a Spanish designer and photographer. And she started emblazing all the Gucci stuff with this kind of graffiti work. So there was a whole range of work from Gucci in 2017 of T-shirts and jumpers and handbags with this kind of graffiti work on them. And I really love this for Fedaria. I couldn't believe when I found it. And it says, what are we going to do with all this future? Which is what Fedaria is. That's exactly what Fedaria is. So, okay, this is her chart here. Before I go into Fedaria, and this would happen for me anyway, is I've got to examine the chart first. My first instinct is to say, before I start talking about periods, then I have to look at the chart. So that's what I've done here. Is it clear enough to you? Can you see it, Anastasia? I'll refer to it. Okay. This is the chart here in Placidus, in quadrant style. It shows the degrees. There's quite a large gap between the degree of the ascendant. It's mutable. They're all mutable signs. I've got Sag, Gemini, Virgo, and Pisces on the cross of matter, which means that the two planets which are in charge of this cross is Mercury and Jupiter. Very interesting plants in Patricia's chart. Both of them have debility. Mercury in Sagittarius is in detriment. Jupiter in Capricorn is in fall. So I've got some real difficult stuff here in this chart automatically. You know, before I start going into aspects or anything else, then I have some difficulty here with both of these rulers of the chart. Jupiter is the ruler of the ascendant and also the ruler of the fourth house. The story of Patrizia, she's actually Patrizia Martinelli at the beginning of her life. She's born in a little, well, it is quite small. It's up in the north of Italy, very much ruled by feudal systems and patriarchy and the church. And she's born to Silvania Martinelli, who's an unwed mother. So the beginning of Patrizia's life is hardship. The father doesn't support them. He disappears. She never meets her father. Patrizia works as a laundress and as a dishwasher. She works at the local pub. And the first 10 to 11 years of Patricia's life is poverty, hardship, malnourishment, a difficult relationship with her mother. Her mother was 21, Saturn term. Her mother was 21 when Patrizia was born, and the mother kind of doesn't forgive the child for being born, which is an odd thing, but it happens, okay? And what we've got here is the mother is in Sagittarius. It's 28 degrees. The moon is 28 degrees of Sagittarius. It opposes Uranus here at 29 degrees. And in fact, it's such a late degree, the ancients would call it a void of course moon, which means that it makes no other aspect as it leaves its sign. Both of these planets, this opposition, goes up to the midheaven. So we have this feeling of shame. We have this feeling of not fitting in. We have this feeling of being embarrassed by, you know, her parentage, the fact that her mother is so poor, there's no money, and the fact that the village doesn't accept this child. That's the first thing, okay? So while Patrizia buries this is the beginning of her life. The other thing is that I will, of course, and that's what I've done here, is I've used the aspects between the moon and between the Uranus and between the midheaven. So we have this sort of abruptness. Now, if we're talking about Patrizia as a nocturnal chart, remember that the first 9 years have been governed by this moon. So it's really been reinforced to this child about how she doesn't belong in the physical world, and that the physical world around her is terrifying and harsh and cruel and barbarous to a child who has no name. So this is the beginning for this child. So we see the whole story of Maurizio and Gucci and all the rest of it, but this is the beginning of it. And this is really underlaid by this moon. The moon is disposited. And again, I use a lot of dispositorship. In other words, because it's in the sign of Sagittarius, I would say, if I look at a planet in a sign, I'm looking at how it's dressed. I'm looking at how I expect it to behave. I know that the moon is in Sagittarius. I know that Sagittarius is a combination of hot and dry. That's the qualities of fire. So I know that it's fearless. I know that it's reactionary. I know that it's impulsive, and I know that it damages her sometimes. But if that's her behavior, that's the moon's behavior in Sagittarius. But if I want to know what the motives for that moon in Sagittarius are, I need to go to the ruler of the sign. In other words, I need to go to Jupiter. And so this Sagittarian moon that I see being fiery, defensive, all this sort of rageous, all the moon qualities of a Sag moon are driven. The engine behind it is this Jupiter-Mars, because the connection is with Mars. Jupiter is in detriment, a fall, I should say. It's in the worst sign it wants. It belongs to Saturn. But the Mars, by being in Capricorn, is exalted. So if we go back to why this moon reacts in the way it does, it's because it knows it's been given a terrible beginning, but it believes that it shouldn't have been given that beginning. That's the Mars. So this is idea of saying, I'm really a princess underneath all this, you know, under all this poverty and you know, lack of food and lack of clothing and lack of shelter. Underneath all this is my potential, and I'm going to get it. And that's what makes her so ruthless, is that Jupiter Mars beneath it. So I've got this idea that this is what the aspect is, but I can't also ignore that I've got Mercury and the Sun together in Sag, and therefore it's going to, when you put Mercury and the Sun together on ascendant, it says literally, I will make a name for myself. You will know my name. That's what Mercury on the ascendant. And if I add the Sun to it, it says, remember me. That's what Mercury and the Sun particularly. But there's detriment, so you'll remember me for the wrong reason. Okay. And
Chiron is conjunct her Mercury as well. I know you don't have Chiron
even
in there,
more. Yeah.
But Chiron is where we feel rejected, you know, so there
exactly, yeah. So you've got the rejection and the pain and the hurt on the midheaven, the ruler of the midheaven, but also from the 7th house too, haven't you, from that point there? Because it's the rulerships of Mercury. So, you know, as much as she loved Maurizio, and I believe she did at the beginning, she's also got the Chiron wound. You know, he gives her everything. He gives her the name, but he also takes it away when he divorces her. And that's when you start to get the real hurt coming through. When I talk about, the other thing is the Venus, of course, Venus in detriment conjunct the South Node. I ought to mention at the same time, and that's why I put Maurizio's here. He was born 10 weeks after Patrizia. No, sorry, the other way around. Maurizio is born on the 26th of September. 10 weeks later, Patrizia, this chart comes into being. So we've got Maurizio born on the 26th of September, 1948. 10 weeks later, Patrizia is born on the 2nd of December, 1948. But this guy, the Gucci guy, is born in opulence, in fame, in accolades, in money, in riches. His parents, I don't know that many people know this, but his father, Ronaldo, was actually quite a famous Italian actor. He'd done over 40 films. So he was he had this persona of being this famous actor, but also coming from this really rich and opulent family from Florence and Milan. So and his mother, Maurizio's mother, is also a famed actress. So he's born with all these amazing things 10 weeks before this poor child is born in oblivion. His moon is 29 degrees of Gemini, which sits exactly on her Uranus and opposes her own moon in Sagittarius. Did they fall in love immediately? No question about it. They recognized something within each other that was beyond wealth or people bringing it down or she's a gold digger or all those sorts of things. His moon needed her to nourish him. His mother died when he was 5 years old from ovarian cancer. She died in 1954. Maurizio's grandfather died, I think 6 or 7 months before his mother died, and Maurizio was dragged out of the acting world into the world of Gucci and manufacturing because his grandfather had died. Gucciano Gucci had died. So this little boy at 5 years of age has lost his mother and the attentions of his father. All his life, he looks for somebody to love him. And that's what Patrizia does. She loves him. So, you know, there's such a strong bond between them. Also, the other thing is that, okay, by the 2nd of December, Venus had moved to 7 degrees of Scorpio, but it's a fast-moving Venus. When Maurizio was born 10 weeks earlier, it was conjunct his Pluto at 18 degrees of Leo, which is also very close to her Pluto at 16 of Leo. So his Venus and his Pluto are on top of her Pluto. It really was love at first sight. And the other thing is the node barely moves in that period, and Maurizio, which is the purple node, the south node is 5 Scorpio, which wedges itself between her south node at 4 and her Venus at 7. This is a fated relationship. Oh, the other thing is his midheaven.
Sure is.
His midheaven at 3 degrees of Aries is square her Jupiter, which is the ruler of her ascendant and the dispositor of her sun, her Mercury, and her moon. That's his midheaven. So he would have found her anywhere. He found her at a debutante party, dressed in this beautiful red, vibrant red gown, but he would have found her in the marketplace. I really believe that. That's the attraction between them. The other dispositor, the link between Jupiter and Mercury is, and I'll get onto Fedaria in a minute, but until I've totally examined a chart, I don't know what a Fedaria is going to mean. And that's why I'm taking some time here. So thank you for your patience, Anastasia.
No worries at all. Some of my background thoughts are that with my rectified time, she's got Scorpio rising. So yeah. But we can leave that aside for the moment. Let you proceed with this. So
okay, thank you. If I use this, I can use aspects. 2 ways I look around a chart: do the aspecting and do the most major aspecting, the most obvious aspecting. I never put my aspect lines in the center, it drives my students crazy, because I say that's your job, you're an astrologer. Never assume an aspect, never let a program do it for you, that's your job. So that's one of my weird little quirks. So they always look so empty, but they're always so visibly accessible. That's my point too. I'll use dispositors as well as aspects. So I look at the fact that Mercury, the sun, and the moon are disposited by Jupiter and end up with the engine of Jupiter-Mars, but I'll also look at the dispositor of Jupiter and the Mars to see the Mercury up here. So they bound up to the top of the chart. Also, you'll notice I've swapped here from Placidus over here to a whole sign chart here. So the ascendant's a little bit lower. The chart starts with 0 of Sag. Here is 0 degrees of Virgo, but I've still got the midheaven here at 29 degrees of Virgo. So I've got Saturn that elevates to the top of the chart, becomes a 10th sign here in the Virgo, and then lo and behold goes back to all of this stuff in Sagittarius. So I've got this bounding from the Venus, the Mercury, Sun, Moon. Remember, the Moon, even though it's in this late degrees, it's still disposited by Jupiter, goes to Jupiter, which goes to Saturn, which comes back. So there's almost like a boomerang effect in this chart. And both of these have something to do with Saturn. So there's a lot of Saturnian principle in Patrizia's life, a lot of Saturnian principle. Okay.
Well, also, by the way, just, and this doesn't necessarily is not dependent on time, so I can bring this in at this point.
Absolutely.
Venus is actually at the midpoint of Mars-Saturn. In fact, the Venus South Node, really. So, or you could say the midpoint of Venus South Node is right there in between Saturn and Mars. I think that's pretty significant.
Actually. Absolutely. Thank you. I hadn't looked at that, but you're absolutely right, because you've got a trine and then a sextile to each. Absolutely. So this Venus in detriment in Scorpio is linked both, and again disposited by the Mars, which is then disposited by the Saturn. So you've got another kind of scenario going on here, haven't you? So yeah, and the South Node. So yeah, absolutely. So okay, if we retain the notion that Patrizia is born in the nighttime, and if you rectify it to Scorpio, then of course all this Sag would plunge deeper into nocturnality.
Yeah, she's definitely nocturnal in my opinion.
Okay, then this would be the run of her Fedaria, and these would be the years. Now, this is where everybody freaks out, okay? Everybody gets the idea that I can divide the years up, you know, and I can put them into block years of 9 years, 11, 12, etc., and I can say this is the age span. Where people get weirdly funny about it is where we divide it to the next level, okay? People will, when I say people, other astrologers will kind of go, oh, I don't use Fedaria, it's way too simple. And this is where they're talking about this system. But what we have here is the potential here, that each one of these years, and this is their years, by the way, the sun gets 10 years, same as the system I told you before. Saturn gets 11 years, Jupiter gets 12 years. They're the diurnal planets. They get a little more than the nocturnals. The moon gets 9 years, Venus gets 8 years, Mars gets 7, and then Mercury always takes out the most number of years with 13 years, okay? So this is the long periods of these here. This is the same thing here, just put into a different table.
Yep.
The long years, okay. Now, they're known as long-term lords, and they oversee the period. They are incredibly important because these are the lessons you have to learn from these planets. However, each of the planets, including the original long-term lord, changes over during their periods. And what we do is we take their long-term periods and we divide it by the number 7. Why 7? 7 because we have 7 planets. 7 original planets. So you come up with these odd little numbers of approximately 18 months for each of Saturn's lords, 20 months. The easy one to understand is Mars because it has the shortest period of 7 years, and 7 divided by 7 is easily 1, and that's a 12-month period. So at each birthday, you'll see the Fedaria for Mars going back to birthday, 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 and changing their what we call the short-term lord. Okay. Now we talk about combinations. Now we talk about the fact that we have these guys who oversee everything, and then these smaller periods where they come through in a chain of me, next, me, next, me, next, me, next, over 18 months, or we've got the maximum for Mercury is almost 2 years, 22 months, and then we have the shortest one for Mars, which is only 1 year, the 12 months. And they hand over this process. Now, okay, the best way I can describe this is that planets have relationships with each other. They are either friends with each other, enemies with each other, or they have no opinion about each other, okay? And this is all based on sharing the signs, okay? I won't go, this is a fairly long, this is another lecture at another time, but believe me when I say there is animosity, there is friendship, and there is, I don't really care. You know, it doesn't bother me. This matters hugely when we start dividing up Fedarias, because we're going to find that when somebody steps in for a period of months, we're going to find there's a relationship here already. So when I go back to, okay, the previous one, when I go back to the printout from Solarfire, or anybody who will print out the dates for Fedaria, which is a blessing because I don't have to work this out. There's just a button I can press, nocturnal or diurnal, and it turns out. You can see that there's a sharing here of 2 planets during that 9 years. Here's the moon going from birth to the age of 9 when Saturn takes over, but you'll find that I'm going to go back, where's the moon? Every 15 months, I'm going to find a changeover. So if I looked at these, they would be roughly 15 months each time. Now, some of these are going to be friends with the moon and some of them aren't. My easiest description, my easiest analogy I can say is, have you ever been to a working bee? Have you ever done a working bee at a club, at a social place, at a school, at a church, or have you ever been involved in that, Anastasia?
What's a working bee? What do you mean?
You're one of the lucky ones. Okay. Other people out there will go, oh, working bees. Oh, yeah, I know what a working bee is. What happens?
I haven't heard that term before.
You arrange, you give your time voluntarily to something. So, you know, it might be the school, and the school says, okay, everybody, sends out a newsletter to all the parents and says, okay, on the 5th of April, we're going to have a working bee all day Saturday. And bring your tools and give me your time, and, you know, you can help us do a particular job, or we're going to send some off here and some off here and some off here. And at the end of the day, we hope we've got these odd jobs done. In other words, we're too lousy to pay someone to do the work, so you guys come and do it for us. Okay.
Got it. Yeah, got it.
Okay. So my major lord, the one who owns the years, is the organizer of the working bee. Okay.
Right.
He or she is the one who sets the agenda, sends out the email, bugs all the parents, drives everyone crazy, and says, I have a list of jobs I want done. Right. And I want them done because I've set the agenda. Okay. Right. Now, on this particular day, only 6 other volunteers turn up. And these 6 other volunteers are your minor lords, are these guys here. Mm. These are your minor lords, and they all have to take instruction from the moon, if that's the moon's period. Yep. So they have their own personalities, they have their own agendas, and they have their own individual relationship with the guy with the clipboard, who is your organizer on the working bee. Now, some of them will resent being told what to do. And that tends to happen when you get Saturn and the moon together.
Oh, yeah.
Saturn is the guy who turns up on the day and says, usually, you know, if it's the moon, it's probably a female who's been given the job. And Saturn's the male who turns up and says, oh, I could have organised this so much better. I would have got more people to turn out, you know. Give me a list. Show me what you want me to do. So straight away, you know that in that period where Saturn has to do the moon's bidding is that there will be trouble. Okay?
Definitely. And can I just interject for a moment? Just to go like at a that's a really great example that you just gave. But I'm just thinking that given that this would be, let's just say for a night birth, it's a baby, it's an infant, or not an infant, but it's a small child, right? 1.3 years of age.
Exactly.
Now, that's to me, I would see that as potentially, you know, just the lack of nourishment from the mother, right?
It may be, but potentially it may be this idea of I have no father. Remember, Saturn is the father figure as well as the sun. Yeah. So in many ways, this sets the tone for the poverty. Even though it's very young, Patrizia won't remember this, but it is like a mark on my soul, if I put it that way. Okay? So if you look at the moon and you look at Saturn in this chart, and this is where it's not just this idea of, oh, we're all the same. This is go back to the chart and look at the chart. Look at the chart. Because if you look at this period, and okay, she's only 1 to 2 years old, but look at who's in charge, the moon and Saturn. And it literally tells you the moon is in Sagittarius. Who owns Sagittarius? Jupiter. And it's in the 1st house. Do I have a namesake? Do I have the name of my father on my birth certificate? This tells me straight away, no. Does this matter to me? Here's Saturn in the 10th house in whole sign in Virgo. Virgo, I have no name. I have no voice. I have no one to stand up and protect me. So even though this is something she would never remember, this tells me it's a mark because of the chart. Right. So in every chart, I know this is the, what do you call the thing? I can't think. Everybody has it. I can't think of the word. It's gone out of my head. This is the standard, or there's a name for it. Generic.
Generic. I thought it might. Yeah.
This is the generic model. But the truth of it is, I need to go to the chart to tell me what's going on.
Definitely.
I need, you know. So it might be malnourishment, and it's almost like it is in. I agree with you, Anastasia. It is malnourishment, but it's the reason for why the malnourishment occurs.
Yeah.
You know, Jupiter is a slight improvement. And then we go into Mars. These two, even though they look like there's animosity between them, Mars belongs to the same Fedaria. So there might be an improvement as she gets older. But when she hits the Mars-Sun period between 5 and 6 years of age, this may be when she goes to school and she gets taunted. You haven't got a father. You don't even know who your father is. I've got a father. All that sort of stuff, you know? So, yeah, these things really matter for anybody. And then we go into the nocturnal period. We move into Saturn, which goes from 9 to 20 years of age. And then we go into Jupiter. So it matters the relationship. Now, Moon puts down the clipboard, Saturn rearranges a completely different working day. And Saturn becomes the one in control. And then we have the difficulties of who doesn't like Saturn. Straight away, I know the Sun doesn't like Saturn, and I know the Moon doesn't like Saturn. So I expect these periods to be difficult for this person. And then I will go back and I'll examine the chart itself. So it's really interesting because I'll get two camps of people who won't use Fedaria for two different reasons. One of them says it's too simple. They're looking at this. And then the other camp says, oh, it's too complicated.
Right.
This, you know, and I keep saying, I agree with both of you. It is too simple and it shouldn't work. And for all the reasons, I understand why you don't trust it. And you view it with some, kind of, oh, I don't know, that looks too simple. And then I can see the others that go, oh my God, look at this list. Look at the dates. Look at the ages. I can't deal with this. It's not that hard.
Yeah, it's not hard actually. From my perspective anyway. I mean, I learnt this system over 20 years ago. It really wasn't very difficult for me back then, and I had far less experience back then to what I do now. But that aside, I think with any system, and you'd agree with this, Joy, regardless of which lens it comes from, which teachings it comes from, you can never assume anything about it unless you actually work with it, practice it, research it, chart after chart after chart, and get the feedback from the work itself. You can never kind of make a definitive sort of decision about a system as to whether it works or it doesn't work until you actually work with it and explore it, right? And that's what people need to do, even with this system. So to some people that are listening today, this is going to sound terribly confusing and daunting to even approach. And to some others, it might sound simplistic. As you said, you've got two camps. I'm sure that's going to come up through my audience as well. And we'll see when you gorgeous people out there write your questions and comments, which, I'll try to address. And if there's something that I can bring to Joy, I'll allow you to answer the question as well. But I think, just important to remind people that whilst this is an introduction, it's still a fairly in-depth introduction. So if it goes over your head, don't worry about that. You really have to practice it yourself if that's something that you are interested in actually learning and practicing. And you don't learn it overnight. I didn't learn it overnight, but after some time, I'll never forget actually, and this is what really clinched my faith in this system, believe it or not, quite apart from my own personal experiences, which I won't go into. But I had a client, this is when I just first started working with this system, and she had a Jupiter in Gemini, okay, which is in its detriment, right?
Yeah.
And she was in a Jupiter period. Now, I can't remember if it was the long period or the sub period. I just can't quite remember that now.
Yeah.
But I remember in the final sort of assessment of her Jupiter, it was very dignified in a lot of ways, but it lost a lot of points because of its detriment position. And she was in a situation at that time in a profession where, when she had come to me for the reading, a lot of the reading was around what's going on with my work life, what can I kind of expect, or what am I dealing with moving forward. And in an uncanny way, I pretty much predicted that she was going to lose her job. Now, I didn't just say it to her in those ways, okay? I said it in a much more kinder way with some solutions and etc. But at the end of the day, the final takeaway, based on this Firdaria system,
Yeah.
it appeared to me at that time that that was going to be the end result. And in fact, that's what did happen. And after that, I thought, okay, I've got to pay attention to this.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just wanted to share that because that's an actual real life experience with a real person, who I worked with, and it was very, very powerful information for me at that time, about
Absolutely.
this
Well,
systems.
I mean, I don't know how we're going for time, but I actually and thank you for that, because that's what we all need as astrologers is confirmation that something works.
Yeah.
You can have a lot more confidence in something, and putting your eggs into one basket isn't going to be enough. I will also use perfections, I'll use solar return charts, I'll use transits, but my baseline, my foundation is always going to be Fedaria. It just
Right.
works.
Yeah.
If I've got the chance to do this, I just wanted to do a little bit of play with her life and her history.
Yeah.
Am I okay to do this, Anastasia?
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. So this is her chart in the center, the nocturnal chart. This is her Fedaria up until 2001. This is the timeline for her. Okay. Now, by showing you this, any viewer can stop and freeze it whenever they want and spend more time with it. Okay.
Exactly.
So I won't go through everything, but there are particular things that jumped out for me. Okay. Now, one of the things that Patrizia does is she reinvents her childhood a little bit. Okay. The reason for this is because around the age of 12 in 1960, and again, I don't know the exact date, but her mother catches the eye and marries this incredibly financially kind of Milan, someone from Milan. Now, Fernando Reggiani, this is where the name Reggiani comes from, by the way. So she's born as a Martinelli. This stepfather adores her and adopts her. And she's actually quoted as saying, I'm used to wealth. My father gave me, my first mink coat was given to me at the age of 12. But she's totally blocked out the previous, 10 or so years where she can barely find food or anything to feed herself with. So this is the idea of, this is her first taste of wealth. This marriage, this stepfather. And he then takes the family to live in Milan. So from the time of 1960 and the 10 years between when she learns what wealth is and she meets Maurizio, this is her absolute excessiveness of 10 years of being this young child from 12 to 22, of apparently turning up in class in jewels and minks, and, now she gets educated. Previously she barely, managed to scrape an education together. He puts her into wealthy backgrounds. This is the age here. This is under a Saturn-Jupiter Fedaria. So we have Saturn, which starts when she's 9 and goes through till she's 20. Saturn, which is the overall feeling of, will this be taken away from me? And this is probably, even it may be around the time when her mother meets this man, around this time here. But Jupiter comes in around the time that she's about 10 and a half. And this is the time here when she's 12 years old and 1 month, that's the time of the marriage. But the actual, I think the change in her fortune happens when we've got Saturn, which is up here in the 10th house, and the sublord, which is Jupiter, in the sign of Saturn, and the ruler of her 4th house, change in living conditions, and also change in persona and the world she moves around in. So this is the change in her life. This is it cementing when the marriage takes place and the adoption takes place when she has the Saturn Mars. And then it goes into the Saturn Sun, which of course is all these years where she changes. She literally, for her, I think, her separation is almost a mental separation of before and after. The old Patrizia, who lives in this village and scrapes along and is
well,
an outcast.
I just want to give you a quote. I just want to give you a quote that's come directly from her mouth. So this is not paraphrased, and this is just really to reinforce what you're just speaking about. She says, better to cry in a Rolls Royce than to be happy on a bicycle. Now, I think that kind of says it all, really, right?
Doesn't it?
So,
Doesn't it? Absolutely.
yeah.
And what you get here, I mean, I've left it in Placidus, but Saturn is the ruler of her second house. Whether we talk about it being a Placidus chart, or we move the Jupiter and the Mars into the second house by whole sign. This is all about what Saturn rules the second house. And in this Fedaria, she learns about wealth. You know, so you can't, she changes her whole background and her local environment, the third house.
Yeah.
You know, and this man gives her her name, he adopts her, he gives her honor for the first time in her life. He gives her a place to belong. It's not just about the money, it's also about, I have a father now. That kind of thing. So it's hugely important to her. This is when she meets, 10 years later, when she meets Patrizio. She meets him at a debutante ball in 1970. Look at this. This is under a Jupiter-Mars Fedaria. And Jupiter and Mars sit next to each other in either the first house or the second house I would use for whole sign. And it says, under this, she meets this man. This is, you know, remember we started this by saying all this stuff in Sagittarius is driven by this absolute thirst of Jupiter Mars, this tenacious ruthlessness.
Yeah.
She was going to grab him hook, line, and sinker, even if she didn't fall in love with him and he didn't fall in love with her, like we saw with the synastry. This is her determination to grab him. And you'll notice this goes because we start the period here in August, and it goes until May 1972. This is their courtship under Jupiter Mars.
And didn't she marry him at the Jupiter's sun? Is that correct?
She certainly did. She married him. Here's the marriage here. The marriage is on the 28th of October 1972 when she's gone into the Jupiter sun.
Yeah.
So she's got the Jupiter and she's got the sun, which is on the ascendant. She's got a name now. She is a Gucci. She is a princess, Jupiter.
Yeah.
You know, she's in absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, of course, Maurizio's father does a whole lot of digging into Patrizia during this Jupiter-Mars period. So it's a dangerous period for her too, because while she is courting Maurizio, the son, the father has all got a team of detectives searching her past, which isn't just about her poverty, but it's also about some very wild times in this 10 years of partying and being a good time girl, you know. So he takes this evidence to his son and he says, you know, like, she's bad news. You can't marry this girl. And Maurizio says, I can't abandon her. I love her. You know, cut me off, do what you can, disown me, anything you want me to do, but I won't let her go. Ronaldo even goes to the point of going to the Cardinal of Milan, the top religious figure, and asking him to intercede and stop the marriage. So this is how determined the father was to absolutely, you know, get rid of her. But they marry, and you know, sort of her best period for her is between 1972 and 1982, the 10 years between there, because the father, to get rid of them, the embarrassment, he gives them this amazing apartment in New York City, which is at the top of the towers, the Olympic Towers. It's absolutely amazing. Maurizio goes to work for Uncle Aldo, which is Ronaldo's brother, in New York, and for 10 years she is this amazing socialite from 1972 to 1982, when they're dragged back to Milan. She is the queen of the ball in New York City.
By the way, in whole sign houses, Venus drops into the first, and that's the social life, right? Because Venus rules that kind of.
It will in your relocated chart, but Venus in this chart will drop into the 12th.
Yeah. Well, I mean, relative to the rectified chart, with the rectified time, Venus is actually in the 12th, right?
Yes.
However, in whole sign houses, it drops into the first.
Yeah.
And I read both whole sign and quadrant, you know, when I'm
Yeah.
looking at any chart actually. And
Good.
Venus in the 12th makes absolute sense. Conjunct the South Node, conjunct the goddess Vesta, which is all about money. And then,
Yeah.
of course, you know, in whole sign houses, Venus in the first, that's her being the social light, which is what
Yeah.
you're describing through those years in her life. That's where that kind of came to its prime sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
activation, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It kind of works for both, whether you know you go with the Sag rising or the Scorpio rising. If you go with the Sag rising, then Venus starts in the 11th house in Placidus, which is the party girl and all these friends and all this socializing, but it drops into the 12th, which talks about all her hidden enemies. Like she's really hated.
Oh,
And
yeah.
while all these friends are smiling at her from the Venus in Scorpio and the South and the South Node here, what they're doing is they're bitching behind her back. Absolutely.
The smiling assassins, right?
Oh
But
yeah, absolutely. And remember, if we took this as a nocturnal chart, she would know this. She would absolutely know this. But she doesn't care. I mean, there's some wonderful times here. I wanted to bring up one thing that happens in 1976 because I think that this person is not just the seventh house is the partner, the partnership with Maurizio, but this is a fascinating side story to the whole saga. And it's the story of Pina Ariema. Now,
I was thinking about her. Yeah,
she's
yeah,
magic. She's magic.
yeah.
There's a recent couple of interviews of her on YouTube, and she just eat it up. She's just amazing.
Right. So maybe just tell the audience who she is, because some
yes.
people might not know.
So Pina Ariema. Now she starts in her own right with her own fame. I don't have a chart and I don't know her data, but before 1976, oh, she's a Sag Sun, is she? Oh, that makes sense. Okay, yeah. She's actually got a TV program in Italy, and she is quite a personality, a TV personality, because she does all this psychic work on TV. But they meet at a summer spa in Italy, and they become they're instantly drawn to each other. So we have the psychic, who is Pina Ariema, and then we have Patrizia. And they talk about being sisters rather than close friends, that they immediately connect. And in this chart, of course, Pina becomes the seventh house. Maurizio is the seventh house as her partner, but so is Pina. And the trouble is that the ruler of the seventh house is here in detriment on the ascendant. Now, there's lots of statements here when you look at the ruler being in the opposite sign to its house. You get a lot of kind of, Benati talks about conflict charts. There's a lot of talk in traditional astrology about what the significance is to have the ruler, particularly of the angles here of the ascendant and the descendant, okay? So we have, this is me, which is designated by the Mercury in the first house, and this is the other person. We could say that the other person is a detriment to me, okay?
Not only that, if I can just interject for 1 second.
Yeah, absolutely.
The goddess Vesta, which is an asteroid, which I'm sure you're aware of, the asteroid Vesta, is on her south node, conjunct Venus as well. Now, Vesta rules sisters. Okay. And here we have two women that meet that feel like they are sisters because they were in the past, most likely, and they are both involved in a murder. Scorpio. It's pretty clear.
It's beautiful stuff, isn't it? It's beautiful stuff, you know?
Sometimes it's just so literal. But anyway, I just wanted to, I really appreciate what you just said, though, with regards to, you know, the sign on the descendant. Can you just repeat that? Because I quite like that.
Okay. So Mercury owns the sign of Gemini. We're happy with that, okay? Right. So wherever, if I want to know about relationships, I'll immediately look for the ruler of that house. So I'll look for Mercury. It'll tell me if it's ninth house or, you know, where I draw my relationship from.
Yeah.
When I find that the ruler of the house is actually opposite the house, then that tells me there is a friend-enemy relationship between us. you know, and it works both ways. It says that both Maurizio and Pina are dangerous for Patrizia because the ruler of my 7th house is doing me harm because the ruler's in detriment. So it says, I'm harmed by them, but I'm also irresistibly drawn to them. But it also has the ability to say the opposite, which sounds like I'm countering myself, but it actually says, I am a danger to you too.
I can see that. I can
my
see
behavior.
That both.
When I'm going to go into a little bit about why Patrizia ended up on trial, because it really is the story of this Mercury in the 7th house. It's absolutely critical to the story. So we've got this incredibly close sisterhood between Pina and Patrizia, to the point where Pina moves into the house with them, to the point where, you know, sort of, she's almost becomes the shadow of Patrizia. She's actually at the birth of Allegra in 1981. Patrizia sets up a accessories and clothing store for Pina, and Pina runs it and owns it. Like, there is this relationship back and forward. And what Pina does for Patrizia is that she becomes the friend that Patrizia has never had. She becomes, I trust her, while all these other bitches are doing this with my Venus in Scorpio, the one person I can believe to tell me the truth is Pina Arima. Absolutely. And you see that you see the kind of the feeling that Pina has for Patrizia, even in that interview in 2021, they did in August last year, about how protective Pina is of this woman. Absolutely. She talks about her mother. She talks about Patrizia's mother, what a monster Silvana is. You know, she talks about, you know, all the things that Patrizia doesn't talk about herself. Pina is now spilling her beans, which is what the Mercury is on the ascendant too. She's doing all these interviews that are telling you the inner life and the inner workings of Patrizia, which the original matriarch would hate, absolutely hate. So yeah, she's talking about writing a book about her. Like, you know, she's really going to spill the beans on it. So yeah, she does a bit of tarot work, but the tarot work, it's interesting, you know, the tarot work that she does is more about amusing Patrizia than actual serious work. I read an article about it that says, you know, Oriema was talented as a tarot reader, but she didn't necessarily use it with Patrizia because she knew Patrizia would use the information in a bad way. So she kind of protected her. I don't know if you know this, but Selma Hayek, she plays Pina in the House of Gucci. Do you know that she's also married, that Salma Hayek is married to the current owner of Gucci? How weird is that?
It is weird.
She's married to, what's his name? I've got it here, Francois Henri Pinault. And that's Salma Hayek playing this woman. And it's just like circles and circles and circles of weirdness.
It is. It really is. It really is.
Weird. So there's dates here that, you know, people can look at in their own time and compare it back to what was happening in her life. Just to go to that trial, and then I'll move on. 1998, the reason the murder took place, what happened is Patrizia talked to everybody about killing her husband, who had not only betrayed her by leaving her in 1985, but had also sold the company in 1983. So she lost his name, they lost the company, and then in 1991, the divorce proceedings started, and then in 1994, it took 4 years to go through the process. It finally settled, and then Maurizio, the day after the divorce, says that he's going to marry his girlfriend, Paola. And he's moved her into his apartments, and that was the final straw. She was going to lose everything then. The alimony, the name, she'd lost the company. She couldn't forgive him for losing the company. That was absolutely terrible. So what she did is she went to Pina, the same woman that she befriended in 1976, and we've got 1998. Where is it here? 1995 is under a Sun Jupiter, Fedaria, This is when she goes to Pina to help her out. Remember that she has met her under a Jupiter-Mercury Fedaria. This is when she meets Pina. This is the most, I think, the second most important relationship in her life. This one here, under the Lords, under this system, if we keep the Sage rising, this is the combination of this awful Jupiter and this awful Mercury. How much influence did this woman have over her for the next, what is it, the next 20 years? So she goes to Pina. This is the way it works. She goes to Pina. She says, I want to kill Patrizia. I want to kill Maurizia. Find me someone. Pina goes to her doorman of her apartment building, says, we want to hire a hitman. The doorman goes to a broke pizzeria owner and says, how do I find a hitman? And then the pizzeria owner goes to a mechanic and says,
I love the Italians. Oh,
I know.
That's hilarious.
Goes from psychic to doorman to pizzeria owner to mechanic.
That's hilarious.
And it's the mechanic that actually shoots him. Wow. But for 2 years, because, and just from, you know, he shoots him 3 times in the back and then he stands over him. I'm sorry, this is a bit gory, but he puts a headshot into him. Now, that headshot was probably the smartest thing he did because it was the signature of the mafia. So for 2 years, the police ran around trying to pin it on the mafia. Okay? Until, remember the sequence, psychic, doorman, pizzerina, until the doorman tells somebody in his building that he ordered a hitman. He was in the process. So he blurts it out. The police say, well, how do we catch these guys? And then they find out the doorman is disgruntled because Patrizia, who's got all the money now, didn't pay them the full amount of money for the hit. How's that for Saturn owning the second house? It was $200,000. She's now this multi-millionaires. She doesn't pay off her stream of accomplices.
Wow.
So a policeman comes in as a hitman. He pretends to be a hitman. He says, he rings up Patrizia on the phone, which is tapped, and he says, if you don't pay them the rest of the money, I will kill you. She gets on the same tapped phone and rings all 3 of these accomplices and abuses them.
Wow.
And the conversation is taped about how they've all done it together. How stupid do you have to be to do that?
Pretty stupid, pretty careless, pretty stupid.
How, and I just love this because by now we've moved into a period of the Sun Mars, because that's when that's when the sting is happening. That's when it's happening until the December 1997. There's the Sun, there's the Mars in the second house, you know, the whole story. Okay, now, really quickly, this is what happens if we change a little bit of Patrizia's story, okay? This is the other one on at the same time as I showed you this was on the Milan building. Common sense is not that common, and I love that.
It's so bloody true, isn't it?
Beautiful, isn't it beautiful? Now, this is if we take this and we add 15 minutes to Patrizia's birth time, okay?
Yes.
Now, remember, she was probably born in a convent for unwed mothers. You know, like there's a birth certificate, but how reliable is it? It's up in the Alps in Italy. If this had changed and her sun had risen, and I've only put at 15 minutes, you know, it's only taken it to 1, but it's still, this is the run of her planets, okay? Instead of going through the nocturnal Fedaria, this is the diurnal Fedaria of starting with the sun and then going through the planets. Let's try this now, okay? Now we have the same, I know, we have the same timeline. I haven't altered anything here, but instead I've put in the diurnal Fedaria and I've marked the periods of when the mother marries and there's wealth is under a Venus Mercury. All this Mercury here is through the period of 1970 to 1976. Then we have a lunar period from 1982 here, which starts to fall apart through the lunar period, and then the Saturn which is when he loses the business and she is divorced officially, to the death of Maurizio under a Saturn-Venus Fedaria. And then we have the Saturn moon, which is the time that she's actually sentenced, the trial takes place, all the rest of it. And a Saturn Mercury when they're doing the sting. Now, we're running out of time, and I know you've been very patient with me. I'll leave this up so people can return to this page. But what we have here is the possibility that this works too, Anastasia.
Look, I completely understand, and that's an inherent kind of problem with astrology sometimes, right? With different principles, techniques, systems, etc. However, on the other hand, with regards to really establishing the accurate time, that certainly does eliminate a lot of those sorts of concerns from my perspective. It still doesn't really kind of address this question, though, really, from the point of view of, well, we can make a case for a day birth and we can make a case for a night birth, right?
Yeah.
And I guess if it was not possible to rectify her time, and if the rectification didn't reflect what I can actually show you in a moment, if you like, what it does reflect so clearly, then you'd be left with the question, and this goes to all you guys. If you decide to work with this system, you have to be really, really careful that you're not bringing in your own kind of biases as well. It's a pretty tricky area because you can't actually make a lot of things fit, but I mean, we haven't really unpacked this, and it would take quite some time. But because you've actually put this together, Joy, would you say that the more favorable one would be the night one, based on more things aligning and connecting? What would you say?
The funny thing is, Anastasia, when I sit back and look at this, I warm, funnily enough, I warm to the diurnal Fedaria. I really do. I kind of think, look, if the rays were coming over the ascendant, then the sun's period starts to be about, I'm a fatherless child, and the shame that is attached to that. The Venus period becomes, at the beginning, the mother's change from poverty to wealth and the enjoyment of wealth through the period of Venus. The Mercury is very interesting because the Mercury, the one thing I will point out to you, though, is if I change this time by 15 minutes, I lose my Mercury midheaven. It goes to Venus. See how it goes from 29 degrees of Virgo at the time of 7:30 to 3 degrees of Libra. Now I'm pulling in all the Venus stuff here, which is interesting. So instead of Jupiter being the lord of, Mercury being the lord of of this midheaven. Sorry, I'm getting tired, so my words are getting cranky. And instead of the Pisces being on the 4th, now I have this idea of the Venus being the ruler of the midheaven. Now this starts to come into play. So the timing is so important. So yeah, I can see the diurnal working, but I'd like to kind of finish on the fact that it looks like I've shot myself in the foot, okay? That I've put 2 Fedarias present.
Not necessarily. As I said, I can understand that because this happens with other types of techniques and teachings as well. Hence why rectification is the power. That's the key. It really is.
But I would, having made that statement about shooting myself before, I would say that Fedaria doesn't just show me what could potentially happen, and I can fit it to both. I say it shows me intent. That's what I think matters. Okay, so if I had this as a client, if she wasn't the famous Patrizia Gucci and I had this as a client, I would put both next to me while I was talking to them. It doubles my workload, yeah, sure, But
Yeah.
by talking to the client,
Yeah.
I really believe it wouldn't be long before one went in the bin and one came on my desk.
I agree.
Because I would be talking to them about the intent and about how they experienced, particularly the first 10 years of life, particularly this Mercury Fedaria here, if it was diurnal, some of the Saturn, the difference between it being Venus or Saturn during puberty. Believe me, conversation sorts this stuff out. Absolutely.
Oh, 100%. It's like you can't read a chart in a vacuum, you know. You need to have some background of that person, that soul, you know, and conversation is what gets you there. So
absolutely.
And that's why rectification is great, because you get what I tend to do when I rectify a person's chart. I ask them for about 6, 7, 8 different dates and events of their life. It has to be to the month and the year, you know. So that gives me a really great background and insight into an individual. And obviously, you know, with rectification, you're working back with a timeline. You're just going back to see, well, what time fits with this event, right? So but anyway, her rectified time. Do you want to know what time it is?
Yeah. What did you rectify it to?
I'll have to. Can I just share my screen? And do you need to finish up?
I want to do two. Okay, I'm just going to finish here. Okay, and this is okay. It shows you if you want to look at things in more on my version of Fedaria. This is the book A Tiny Universe's Companion, which was published in 2018. I also have a couple of things on the internet which your viewers might be interested in. There's a Oraculous podcast I did with Michael Bryan in December 2020, and it featured the chart of Frida Kahlo, the Mexican artist. So so that's very freely available. Also,
how do they access that podcast? Where would they need?
Just type in Oraculous podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, Oraculous, Oraculos, or put in Michael Bryan. Okay. He's got a whole series there interviewing with different people. So that's on Fedaria and the introduction to Fedaria back in 2020. There's also on my website, there's a series of blogs from when I start them. I started them in 2019 and worked through 2020. And what I did was I broke down 3 years of periods of time of from the life from 18 to 72 years of age, and looked at only 3 years periods, and looked at nocturnal and Fedaria and diurnal, and what would be happening depending on whether you're born on the day or the night time. So people can explore that. The AA conference, I think that's available still. That was done in October. And the other thing is that Esoteric Technologies, there's a series of lectures by me that you can get through this website of Esoteric Technologies, go through lectures, and there's a series of lectures on different topics that are traditional that you can download and buy instantly from Esoteric Technologies. So that's really my basis, and that's lastly my acknowledgement. So thank you for the photography, for the artists on Unsplash. I really appreciate it, and they build up the background for what I do. So yeah.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I'd love to see the rectified chart, Anastasia.
Yes. Well, first of all, let me just say thank you so much. That was incredible. And like there's so much to take in there, you know. So for those of you that are watching this and listening to this, you'll probably need to, you know, listen to it a few times. And as you saw, Joy's got quite a few different resources available through different podcasts and websites, etc. You can pause and, you know, check this out, you know, write the names down and so forth. But Joy, thank you so much for sharing, you know, your wisdom and your experience. I know it takes a lot of time to put something like that together. I know it's, you know, it takes time and effort and energy. So we all are very, very grateful to you for that, for sure. And it's been actually really insightful just listening to I love that you are able to really use very how can I put it, examples in plain English, you know, I think that's really important when you're trying to teach something through astrology, particularly for people who are not familiar with the language of astrology. You need to be able to explain things in English, right? And I think you did that really well today. I just thought that was amazing. Just the very real, mundane, day-to-day, nitty-gritty type of examples. I think that really helps people, make the connection, right? So I think it was amazing. And that timeline, I'm favoring night.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm favoring night, and that's primarily because as I said, I've rectified her chart anyway. So anyway, I'll just share my screen quickly
Yes,
and
please.
just
Thank you.
show you all. Whoops, what I've
Hello,
got here.
gorgeous.
That's my baby girl. Yeah. So I did actually have a look at the Fedaria for both night and day,
Yeah,
just as you presented today. So I had a look at all of that myself. But
yeah.
anyway, this is the rectified time of birth, which is 6:38.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite a fair distant time back to the time given, because the time
Mm.
given was 7:30.
Yes,
Um,
yeah.
but I think, like you mentioned before as well, and certainly I know this has been my experience, you're talking about a birth that was back in 1948, right?
Yeah.
So we really
Mm.
don't know the circumstances of how that time was actually documented, the context and the circumstances. So in my experience, it's not so unusual to have a time go back that far. It's not typical. You don't see it every day, but it's not that unusual as well. Now, that being said, and regardless of the context and the details and the things that we'll never know about because we were not there, so we don't
Mm.
know what happened in that sense. But what I would like to show is just one very quick thing. So this chart here that I'm showing you now is a primary directed chart. Okay, and this primary directed chart reflects the time that her husband was killed, and it's just missing the D there because it
Yeah.
wouldn't allow me to put in any more letters.
Yeah.
So, in a nutshell, what basically happens in this primary directed chart, which is the date of her ex-husband being murdered, is that Venus and the South Node basically are at the midpoint of the midheaven. That's one thing. The
Mm.
other thing is that the second and eighth house cusps, just those cusps there,
Yeah.
are pretty much exactly, as you can see, to the degree squaring Venus.
Mm.
Now
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about money, relationships, love, partnerships, husband, wife, whatever you want to call it. So essentially, you're talking about these two houses coming into this exact square that they do with Venus. They don't do that with any other time except this time, the time that I've rectified it to. You won't get it with a 7:30, you won't get it with a 7:45 time, or even a 7 o'clock time for that matter. That's pretty compelling evidence for that incident that occurred relative to these house cusps, particularly because of the motivation and drive around what led to that event, which was money, second house, eighth house, um, and of course the midheaven being at that degree as well, and being at the midpoint of Venus Saturn, which is in a sense it's sort of indicating a fated, destined event. Really, it was just destined to happen, essentially. So there are other primary directions that we did as well relative to when she met Patrizio, actually, and when they got married, the timing of that. And anyway, so the timing of the major events of her life, basically, from my experience,
Yeah.
which is largely reflected through my mentor, who's been working. It's called the Nadi system, which you may or may not have heard of. He's been working with this system for 45 years, so this is not experimental. It's based on a lot of experience, and so yeah, we ended up with 6:38, just very in a summary sort of way. So
Yes.
I mean, you could think about it for yourself if you wanted to, and it would just be interesting to um, yeah, if you had the time and the desire to do so, you could think about it with this time and this ascendant. I know it would be more work because you would have to consider obviously different rulers to the ascendant descendant axis. Um, but I'm confident with this time, so I'm staying with this time, particularly with those primary directions. You're not going to get those house cusps coming to that Venus at the exact same degree, squaring them with any other time. So that's fairly compelling for me.
I liked the Jupiter Mars on the ascendant too, of the one you showed me just then.
Primary directed chart, this
Yeah,
one?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Look at that.
Well,
Look it
I
up.
mean, it's in primary directions though. This is not nearly close enough.
Okay.
Yeah, because see, the ascendant, the primary directed ascendant is 8 degrees, and a 4 degree and 3 degree, which is what Mars and Jupiter are at. That they won't get to that for years,
Okay.
So yeah, it's just a
Okay.
different sort of process with primary directions. You don't have this thing of sort of having a flexible rubber band orb, as it were. It's
Yeah.
a very precise technique that corresponds to actual time. And the reason that these house cusps are 7 degrees and Venus is 7 is because that reflects the time, the exact time of that event. Whereas that ascendant and in fact Mars, sorry, correction, the ascendant has already gone past the
Ah,
Jupiter and the
yes.
Mars,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
that would have been years earlier. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, that's
Oh, thank you.
just a little bit of sharing that I wanted to kind
Yeah.
of give, just as an from my perspective.
Yeah.
And yeah, I suppose I'll leave that there. I think I asked you most of the questions that I wanted to ask, which was about the nodes. I just wanted to know where you put the nodes. I think that's important for
Yeah.
people to know if they're going to work with this system. 'Cause,
Absolutely.
if they're working with solar fire, just to kind of show people, because I know you had it in your slides, but it would just be good for people to kind of know where to go in solar
Absolutely.
fire. So for those of you watching, if you want to know how to access Firdaria Periods, you would just go to the right hand side tabs where it says pages. That's if you're working with solar fire. Then you would go to the name classical on this left hand side where all these labels are. And then you would go to what's labeled Greek Persian planetary periods. And if you click that, uh, you will basically get this diagram in front of you, which it's worked it all out for you. This is
Yeah.
based on Patricia Gucci's chart, whose chart we were just exploring and discussing, and this is based on the rectified time. So it brings up a night birth, which means it starts with the moon, as Joy has just explained over the last couple of hours. So this is the Fedaria drawn out for you with the position of the nodes, okay, which as we briefly touched on, I asked Joy, do you put the nodes in? Where do you put them in? There's another system that you'll find in Solar Fire that's also accessible, which would put the nodes somewhere around here between, somewhere around here between Mars and the Sun. So it happens at around about the age of 39 to 42, is it? Something like that, I think.
Yes, yeah, 5 years, yeah.
So you'll find them there, but through time and teachings and translations, as Joyce said as well, and through Rob Hand, who is an incredible authority, I think, on particularly on traditional, ancient astrology. He also agrees that the nodes actually correspond to the later years of life, which start at basically 70 years of age. So that's what you see there now. I'm just showing this, Joy, because people, if they are working with solar fire, they need to know how to access this and what it looks like, because it looks different to the slides that we went through, just so that people can identify what we're talking about, right? So there it is there. And you just do this for any chart. Obviously, you would have your chart up on the screen and you just click on your chart again, just finally one more time. Just in case. No, actually, you can rewind it, guys. It's not live. Sorry, you can rewind it. Yeah. So I can leave that there. So I just wanted to kind of show people that as well.
Yeah. It's a really good idea because people go, well, I've seen it, but how do I get it? So yeah, thank you. That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you've got. Do do you do a course in this? Do you teach a course or a workshop, or have you got something like that going? Or
Look, I teach under the name of Astromundi, which is myself and Mari Garcia. And probably we wouldn't touch Fedaria until the third year if we were teaching. But as I said, there's introductions to it in all sorts of ways that people can look. You know, if people like books, then it's in companion. If they like a screen that they can stop and start, there's Oraculus. If they like a blog, there's the Tiny Universe. So yeah, there's lots there if they want to. And if I've got any questions, look, I'm happy for you to pass on my email address. You know, if people sort of say, look, you know, you can contact me by email through my website too. So if people have got a question about Fedaria, I'm more than happy to answer it and talk about it anytime. So yeah.
Awesome. So Joy, do you use it every time in your forecasting work? Yeah.
I'll always lay out the Fedaria. I will use perfection. I show perfection in the blogs, in the Tiny Universe blogs, how I would use it. I use solar returns, and then my last thing is to look at where a transit sits. And I guess that's why I'm nervous of rectification for myself, because I use 4 methods of predictive work. And the trouble is when you're dipping in and out of 4 methods, you know, and I noticed, and this is a question, and thank you for explaining to me the progressed chart, because I don't use progressions.
Right.
So yeah,
that was a primary directed chart, which is a bit different.
I don't use primary directions. I don't use solar arc, don't use primary directions. So
And look, I mean, a lot of the time, you know, you don't have to. There's a lot of astrology you can do without rectification. There's a lot of astrology that you can still do without having the exact right time of birth. There is a lot. I mean, so many astrologers have been doing it forever. So I'm not saying that, you know, nobody could do astrology without a rectified time, but there is something very, very special about that, you know, those techniques and being able to establish that, to work with that. And it doesn't appeal to everyone because, look, I mean, it's not my favorite thing to do, let me tell you. I usually pass it over to my mentor anyway, you know, get him to do most of that kind of stuff for me. You know, we just have this arrangement going because he's just an absolute genius at that. He's a wizard, you know. He's just got that kind of mental capacity, let's say. It's a strength, you know, et cetera. But on the other hand, like I said, there's so much astrology you can do that will still be very, very effective, obviously, right? You know, without an exact time of birth. But and
there's this big debate, you know, which is so false and so unnecessary and takes up so much energy, you know, modern, traditional, who likes this, who likes that? And to me, it's pointless, it's crazy, because the thing is that astrology is an energy. If it speaks to you, if it works for you, if your passion is there, it will work. It doesn't matter what process you use or what technique you use. So this whole conflagration, you know, this is bad and this is good and this, you know, this is crazy, because the thing is that if you're an astrologer by heart, your passion will be true, and you'll work with astrology with integrity no matter what system you use. Let's not fight about it, guys.
100%. I've never had an argument with somebody about I would never even use the words this is good, this is bad. I don't even use that language to begin with. You could never, it's just ridiculous to assume that this system is bad and this system is good. It comes down to exactly what you said. It's about finding the resonance of what vibrates with you, right? With your heart, with your soul, and then connecting it with your mind, obviously, and just choose whatever that is for you. There's no right or wrong in anything in the essence of truth, right? There is no right or wrong. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's been an honor, and I've really enjoyed. Thank you for letting me speak about what I do. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us and sharing all that with us. It's been awesome, and I'm sure many people are going to really be very, very grateful as well, and possibly get in touch with you in order to, or try and research some of the material you've got available already, podcasts. So, guys, just rewind and pause where Joy had her screen where there was emails and websites and things like that, so you can all access it there. And leave your comments and questions below, because I would love to hear your feedback
Oh, yes.
on what was offered today, and what wasn't clear, what was clear, what you got out of it. Love to hear everything. So please feel free to share your comments and questions, and I will see you all very soon. Joy, just hang on with me for a moment while I just yeah. Okay,
Bye,
thanks
everybody.
everyone, and bye for now. We'll see you soon. Thank you.